Good morning, everybody. It is 7 o'clock, nearly 2 years into the pandemic, and a stark reminder it's not gone away with the emergence of the Omicron variant. New rules come into force this morning requiring masks on public transport and in shops, and the booster programme is being rapidly expanded, with the UK aiming for 500,000 jabs per day. But just how concerned should we be about this new variant? And could we all be getting more restrictions for Christmas? We'll speak to the Health Minister, one of the country's leading scientists, and the boss of the International Air Transport Association in the show this morning. Also to come, we'll be chatting to this man, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, after it's revealed that 2 cases of the Omicron variant have been found in the capital. That's at about 8:20. And
they're a place to heal, not just on a personal level, but as we've come to understand, at a global level.
Planting the green shoots of recovery with Ben Fogle. We'll speak to the TV presenter and adventurer about his new campaign to preserve the woodlands right around the UK. It's Tuesday, the 30th of November. More masks, more booster jabs, more testing. The new rules coming into force in England today to try to slow the spread of the new COVID variant.
I'm live at one of the busiest train stations in the country to see how commuters fare with the new mask-wearing rules on public transport.
Saying goodbye to the Queen, the Caribbean island leaving its colonial past behind.
And I'm here in Bridgetown, where Prince Charles has acknowledged the appalling history of slavery in the Caribbean and described this as a new beginning for the island nation.
A court in Myanmar defers a verdict on elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi, who was deposed in a military coup.
Prosecutors accuse British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell of preying on vulnerable young girls at the beginning of her trial in New York. Good morning, everybody. Masks are now compulsory in shops, hairdressers, post offices, trains and buses. The new measures are intended to slow down the spread of the new Omicron variant of coronavirus, with 11 cases found so far in the UK. So let's take a look at what is changing. All international arrivals must now take a PCR test on or before day 2 and self-isolate until they receive a negative result. And these 10 countries in southern Africa are now on the red list, meaning that people returning from there have to quarantine in a government-approved hotel for 10 days, costing more than £2,000. In England, face coverings will become compulsory on public transport and also in shops, in line with the rest of the UK. But unlike Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, people in England won't have to wear a mask in pubs and restaurants. In schools, staff and pupils in Year 7 and above are strongly advised to wear face masks in communal areas unless exempt. Tonight, teachers and pupils in Wales will have been told they should wear face coverings in indoor settings. Educational and childcare settings should also continue to encourage staff and students to test twice weekly using lateral flow device tests. Cool. There'll be a small written test on that later on. The Health Minister, Gillian Keegan, is here. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's a lot for people to take in. Are we already too late, though, to stop this virus, this variant, I should say?
Well, I mean, clearly we've got some cases in the country, but we have acted as quickly as we possibly could. I mean, we found out, actually, I think we were the first country to find out, and we acted straight away. But this is the nature of this, you know, we're working internationally, but, you know, normally when you find a variant, you know, the reality is it exists already. Obviously, now what we've got the 5 cases here. They're doing, you know, contact tracing on the ground to make sure that, you know, we isolate people who've been in contact with those cases. But, of course, we've been here before. You know, this is a variant that's here, and all the measures we're putting in place are because we don't underestimate new variants.
You said 5 cases. I mean, do we know how many cases we've got?
We've got 5 here, 6 in Scotland as of this morning, but, you know, I'm sure that will rise. I mean,
where are the 5 5 cases?
The 5 cases, I think they started...
Some in London?
Yeah, there's a couple in London, Camden and Wandsworth in London. Then there's one in Chelmsford, Brentwood area, and I can't remember where
Another
the others are,
couple
but,
as well. OK, I think in Nottingham as well.
Nottingham, yes. They were the first 2, Nottingham and the Brentwood area.
Joe Biden said there's no cause for panic. Are we in danger of overreacting?
Well, we're trying to get that balance and proportion, and it is difficult because it's unknown, so we need to buy some time so our scientists can work with the world's leading scientists to just basically sort of figure out we know it's very transmissible by looking at but we don't know, whether it will work with the vaccine will work, all the other treatments, etc. So the scientists do need some time for that. We think we've got the balanced and proportional response to it, but we will review it in 3 weeks. That'll give the scientists enough time to hopefully give us some insights then.
I'm going to be chatting to Willie Walsh, actually, in a short time, and he is not at all happy.
Yes, and that's why we're trying to get the balance right with the variant. Obviously, we put some more countries on the red list, but, we're not doing some things which would potentially, shut travel down altogether. We're very much trying to keep things going, keep people travelling, etc. But of course, we have put a few more restrictions in place.
And do you know how long that red list will stay in place?
Well, they are reviewed every 3 weeks. So the red list is always reviewed every 3 weeks. So we'll continue to
because,
review
of course,
that.
there are quite a lot of cases in Europe. You're not thinking of adding them to the red list as well?
Again, that will be continually looked at. It will be looked at all the time. And obviously, if you get some flare-up in cases, then, then we can take immediate action if we need to.
So what about, in the meantime, what about the booster? What's going to happen to when is everybody going to be able to have a booster if they want one?
Well, they're working on the plan right now. So obviously we took the JCVI advice. The NHS are working on operationalising that. So in the next couple of days, that will come out, the booking systems, etc. You'll be contacted by your GP. That's usually the first step. But we'll be
within
releasing
the next couple of days?
The next couple of days we'll have the plan, and I'm pretty sure it will go in age order again. So we'll do the top age groups, the older people first. I mean, obviously, most of the old people, we've done 17 million booster jabs.
When you say old people, I've had
That's
mine.
okay.
Yeah, I've had my booster, so steady on. But by the end of the week, everyone will know when they can have a booster?
Well, I think probably what will happen is the next cohort will be invited forward, and then they'll be given, some time frames. So, but within the next couple of months, we are pretty good at this, standing up these operations. So we do know what to do, but we just need to give the NHS a bit of time to operationalise, the new, because we're doubling the eligible people more or less who are due a booster now. So.
But how tricky is that going to be, given that already we have, I think, at 2.5 million boosters a week, something like that? You want to do another 1 million boosters a week. Have you got enough staff?
Well, we've used in the past, NHS staff, obviously the community nursing staff, the pharmacies, the GPs, volunteers, retired doctors and nurses. We've used that pool of staff in the past, so I guess they're going to be looking at which of those they need to, bring back into the mix. So you're going to
mobilise an army of NHS people?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, I don't know, lots of. In my case, we had lots of retired doctors and nurses. We had lots of community volunteers as well who had first aid training. So we did have a lot of that in the first instance.
And they'll get the call up again?
Well, they'll look at what they need to do. But, we do have, the facilities, we do have the people, and we do have the vaccine. So they'll just be putting the plan together to see what's going to make most sense, what's going to optimise.
Do we know if this vaccine's of any use whatsoever against this variant?
I mean, obviously, it will be of some use. What we don't know is how this will, we need the scientists to look at that. That's, again, a couple of weeks. The scientists have said they need a couple of weeks to do all the testing of this against, all the various vaccines that we have, plus the vaccines, plus the boosters. But, of course, the very, very best thing you can do is come forward, get your first jab if you haven't had it, second jab if you haven't had it, and your booster when you're due.
Could be that we're completely overreacting.
I'd rather overreact than underreact at this point. I think we've been here so many times that, we've got this fantastic wall of vaccine now. We want to keep that. We want to strengthen it. We'd rather be stronger to be able to, face any new variants. And I think we have all the things, we have all the capability to do that. So that's what we'd rather do.
The clinically vulnerable are being asked to come forward again. Could they find themselves in a position where they're going to have to be jabbed every 3 months?
I haven't heard that, but I think, clearly the clinically vulnerable are the people that you want to make sure have as much of the protection as possible.
OK. How will we know if we've come into contact with an Omicron variant?
How will we personally know? Well, you probably only know from the PCR test. That's the other reason the PCR
we don't
test.
know it's Omicron, though, do we?
We would know. The PCR test is where they send that off for the genome sequencing. That's where you find out if
But
which of the variants.
not all of the labs that it's sent to are able to find out about whether it's Omicron or not at this stage.
The genome sequencing is the second, so they then go to the labs and then they send them off to the labs. So I'm not 100% sure what that process is going to be, but the reason we've introduced PCR tests for travellers is because we want to get that for genome sequencing.
Yeah, but my point is, you could have come back, you could have had your test, it would be positive, you would have found out within 48 hours. Then I'm guessing, I don't know, who is it test and trace, who would then say to me, you've been in contact with somebody for...
Well, you have to isolate anyway, right? So if you've tested
but I wouldn't
positive...
have to, so how would I know whether I'd come into contact with somebody who'd had Omicron?
How would you know if you've been in contact with somebody who's been
how
tested
quickly
positive?
would I know that I had been in contact with someone who'd got Omicron? I could have seen hundreds more people before you'd found out that I'd been in touch, and then before you knew
Well, they're doing that right now, right? In Camden, in Wandsworth, they're going around figuring out everybody that these cases have been in contact with, and they get it. So it's the contact test, the test and trace system, which is getting all your contacts, finding out who you've seen, where you've been. So, that's the manual process.
The test and trace scheme only picks up half of cases, doesn't it?
Where have you got that figure from?
That's NHS figures.
In terms of?
Half of the cases that are test and trace only picks up half of cases, and that all the testing that the labs do cannot all pick up Omicron.
They don't all do. We don't send we don't send every PCR test for genome sequencing. I would imagine now they're going to be sending a lot of those PCR tests for genome sequencing because we've got a new variant. But in terms of now, the intention now is everybody that those people have been in contact with, they will be contacting each one of them. So,
but we're going around the houses to say that it's going to take a long time to find out whether somebody's got Omicron, and then you contact somebody else, and then before you know it, it's spread everywhere.
Well, that's why we're asking people to isolate. That's why we're asking people to isolate until they get a result, and then if they get a positive result, then obviously they'll look into that result more clearly. That will obviously go for testing. That's why we're asking people to do PCR. So if it's positive, it can be genome sequenced, it can be checked. So that's the processes will be putting in place now, but that's the sequence of events. And we can do that. We can do that so that we can follow, the test. Now, obviously, it gets to be different. We've seen this before with Delta, right?
And all the people that are in contact with you, if you've got it, will then all have to self-isolate as well. So that would be 6 people or so in the studio right now. Before you know it, we've got another pandemic on our hands, haven't we?
Well, obviously, what we don't know right now is how fast this is going to transmit, and what our wall of defence, how well it's going to hold up. That's why we're putting these precautious measures in place. That's why we're reintroducing masks, and we're asking people to be more cautious. We're putting the PCR test in day 2 so that we can get that data. But yeah, right now we are being cautious. We'll know more in 3 weeks. And of course, the key thing is...
But you acknowledge there could be some level of pandemic like we saw in
the
summer.
I think it really depends what the scientists say about our wall of defence, about how well the vaccines work. There's a lot of things we need to wait for them to come up with the answers to that. But, clearly we know... We've been through every variant of this. Excuse the pun. We've been through every kind of...
I think there are a few more coming.
Yeah, well, possibly, but we've been through all of this in the past, right? We've had to have, pandemics. We've had to isolate people a lot. We're trying now to use all of the tools that we have.
The point I'm getting at is we could find ourselves in that position at Christmas time,
where
people are having to self-isolate.
We're in a much better position because of the vaccine rollout.
But you're asking people to self-isolate, aren't you? So they could find themselves in a position where you can't see your family at Christmas.
No, we're very, very much hoping that we can keep Christmas on track. We're asking people to isolate if they test positive with a PCR test after they come back. So they have to, isolate until you get your result, basically. That's what we're asking people to do. But of course, we need a couple of weeks just to work out how virulent it's going to be, and most importantly, how well the vaccines work. But we are in a much different position than any of the other variants, because we do have many more people vaccinated.
If I've come into contact with you and you've got it, I have to self-isolate, don't I?
Yes.
OK, so we could find ourselves in a position at Christmas where you can't see your family.
Well, obviously you could be self-isolating over Christmas. You could be. But what we're hoping is that, you know, we keep these cases. Obviously, everybody's going to be contacted. People will start the isolation. With or without this, you could be isolating for Christmas, you know, with another variant.
But your boss, the Health Secretary, said that Christmas was on track and it was all going to be fabulous.
Well, of course, Christmas is on track. And actually, what everybody wants for Christmas is, if you haven't had your first jab, come and get it. If you haven't had your second jab, come and get it. And if you haven't had your booster, come and get it when you're asked. Yeah. That's all we want for Christmas.
And if you're in contact with somebody who's got Omicron, you might be self-isolating.
But today, it's the same if you have any variant today. You know, if you are positive today, then you isolate.
He's not right to say that then, is he?
Well, I mean, there will be some people who will have to be isolating over Christmas. There always was. You know, if you have a positive test, then you isolate. You know, we've got, you know, some politicians isolating at the moment.
Yeah,
you know?
But if you come into contact with people, you don't have to self-isolate.
Yes.
But now you're saying you do with the Omicron variant. So all I'm saying to you is we can find ourselves in a position where Christmas is ruined again.
Hopefully not. And it's, you know, we've got 5, so let's be proportional and balanced as we're trying to be. We've got 5 cases today. That will go up, I'm pretty sure. But, you know, what we're trying to do is really clamp down on that as much as possible. Obviously, putting these departure, these other tests in place are all to try and limit the number of people who are in that situation.
I get it, and I certainly wouldn't want to be in your position or indeed the Health Secretary's position, but all I'm saying to you is, as of this morning, given that we have to self-isolate now, if we come into contact with somebody who's got Omicron, then we won't be able to see our loved ones at Christmas.
Well, the chance of that right now is pretty low, right? We've got five cases in the country.
But
so behave sensibly, as we've said to everybody. You know, we're reintroducing masks. We're trying to delay, you know, the spread of it so that we can buy the time for the scientists to be able to give us some facts, really, on how well we're protected with what we've done already. So that's what we're trying to do. And we're basically saying, come forward, get your jab, get your boosters. The boosters will help. We think they will help. And we're just trying to deal with this unknown at the moment. We very much hope that we have a Christmas this year. You know, we've had an awful experience last year, and it is unfortunate timing from that perspective. But you know, we very much hope keep your Christmas plans in place. But of course, we will have to deal with it as the scientists get more information to us. We'll have to deal with what they tell us.
OK, we're out of time, sadly, but it's good to talk to you as always. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thanks a lot. Let's have a quick look of what's happening as far as the newspapers are concerned. The Financial Times leads on the UK widening the booster jabs programme to all adults in the hope of beating the Omicron variant. The Metro Front also reports on the expansion of the booster jabs rollout, while the Mirror carries the headline "New Variant Battle" as the gap between second and third doses is cut to 3 months. And The Guardian reports ministers want the NHS to return to distributing 500,000 jabs every single day. Still to come on the programme for you, as the government brings in new measures to try to curb the spread of the new COVID variant. We'll speak to a member of SAGE and immunology specialist at around 7:45. Speaking to the newly appointed Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, Lisa Nandy, about the latest reshuffle of Labour's shadow government and what that may mean, potentially, for the future of the party. And we'll hear from the former chief of British Airways about the recent travel bans in response to the new COVID variant and the impact on the tourism and airline industries. I'm not sure whether Christmas is safe or not after that. What do you think? Let me know at Burley. Now, Barbados has become the world's newest republic. A 21-gun salute was fired just after midnight, marking the official end of formal ties with the monarchy. The Prince of Wales acknowledged the appalling history of slavery in the Caribbean and described it as a new beginning for the island nation. Rhiannon Mills is in Barbados for She Stayed Up specially. Thank you, Rhiannon. So, tell us about what happened today.
Well, as you can imagine, Kay, Independence Day is always a big party, a big celebration here in Barbados. But we've just witnessed a truly momentous night as the Caribbean island, which has been known to some for so long as Little England, finally cut ties with the royal family after almost 400 years, deciding to step out as a republic, the first Commonwealth realm to do so in over 30 years. And all watched on by the Queen's son, the Prince of Wales, who himself used this moment to make a really important speech, going further than any other member of the royal family by acknowledging the real horrors of the slave trade here in the Caribbean. At National Heroes Square, once known as Trafalgar Square, change was again coming. The Prince of Wales arriving to witness the ceremony as Barbados said goodbye to the Queen. This was the final time after nearly 400 years that a royal would oversee a military parade in this way. The moment had come. The Queen's standard was lowered, and then the countdown to midnight. Barbados no longer a realm, now a republic. The new president, Dame Sandra Mason, was sworn in. First to pledge her allegiance was Prime Minister Mia Mottley, who's pushed so hard for this new stage of independence. As those ties were cut, Prince Charles formally acknowledged the pain of the past.
From the darkest days of our past and the appalling atrocity of slavery, which forever stains our history, the people of this island forged their path with extraordinary fortitude.
But for those who've waited so long for this, they still want more.
We want tangible actions towards reparations for our people, for our nation and our country. We have endured a lot. We still endure the legacy of the enslaved period.
COVID meant that large crowds were kept out, and many are still divided about what this really means.
I think there should have been a public vote, and I think it should have been decided by the people and not by a few MPs.
Everybody's out, celebrating, feeling proud.
The royal family have always said this was a decision for the people of Barbados. After all, they have been independent since the 1960s, and the Queen's role has largely been ceremonial. But this certainly is not the royal family entirely stepping away. They will still be front and centre when it comes to maintaining those connections and shaping that new relationship. Rihanna was a surprise guest. This is a new chapter, described by some as a full stop on their colonial past. Now 2 women at the helm, writing their future. Now, for those who will be waking up in the next few hours, and even for those who maybe haven't even gone to bed yet, there aren't any real kind of physical changes that you'll see here in Barbados. A lot of it is going on behind the scenes. Of course, things like the livery on the post boxes is going to have to change. They'll no longer be the Royal Police Force. It will no longer be Her Majesty's Prison. But the important stuff that's going on is still that transition around what exactly the Constitution is going to look like. And a big part of that is because, don't forget, there was no referendum here. So people didn't actually get to vote to become a republic. So there are still those who are divided about whether this is really the best way forward. Some people who still see Barbados as being very vulnerable by taking this step. Things like the climate crisis, ongoing issues around COVID because they rely so much on tourism here, but also that issue around reparations when it comes to the slave trade as well. And those are the big issues that Prime Minister Mia Mottley is now going to be taking to the world stage as they take that independent step forward.
OK, Rhiannon, thank you very much indeed. Thanks a lot. Meantime, a military court in Myanmar has delayed its verdict in the trial of the ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi. The country's democratically elected leader was deposed in a coup and arrested on charges of incitement earlier this year. Siobhan Robbins is standing by for us. Now, hello to you, Siobhan. So this has been deferred for now. What happens to her in the meantime?
Well, for the meantime, Aung San Suu Kyi will go back under house arrest. She hasn't been seen in public since she was arrested in February. And to remind people of what happened, Aung San Suu Kyi was the very popular leader of the NLD party. That party got a resounding victory in a general election in 2020. And then in February this year, the military seized power in a military coup, saying that it believed there'd been widespread electoral fraud, despite the fact there hasn't been any widespread evidence of that. And from that point, it detained Aung San Suu Kyi, other leaders and the president. And since then, she's been facing a slew of charges and offences against her, including these incitement charges, which we're expecting a verdict in today. Also claims that she breached COVID-19 protocol, that she breached the Official Secrets Act, that she illegally imported walkie-talkies. Now, her supporters have said these are absolutely bogus charges thought up by the military to try and keep her out of power because she is so popular. But it's very difficult for us to know what's been going on in court because the court has been held behind closed doors. Quite recently, the lawyers who've been representing Aung San Suu Kyi and the president have been barred from speaking to the press. But we spoke to a source today who's close to the court who told us that today's proceedings have been deferred. We're now expecting a verdict next week, potentially on the 6th. But if she's found guilty of all of the offences against her in the future, that could be a prison sentence of more than 100 years.
OK, wow, goodness. Thank you very much, Siobhan. Thank you. Looking at some of the other news for you this morning on the programme. Here we go. 27 people drowned, as you know, when their boat sank off the coast of France in the deadliest single disaster on the busy route. 21-year-old Mohammed Ibrahim Zeda was on board the inflatable dinghy when it ran into difficulties and began to lose air.
At first, water started to flow into the boat and the rear side by the motor. We were emptying the water. We saw a ship and said, let's go towards them. But the people on the boat said, no, we shouldn't go. This boat must reach Britain tonight. Then we moved away and ships in the sea started to disappear. There was only this inflatable boat and it started to lose air. The balloons had blown up. The balloons on the right-hand side of the boat were now losing air. There was a pump inside the boat. So some people started to pump air, while others were emptying water from the boat. Later, the people lost hope and gave up when we started to sink gradually. The waves started to push us towards France, and the boat sunk, and all the people fell in the water. We started to hold each other's hands. Each person held the hand of the next person in order not to sink or drown in the water. But with the sunrise early in the morning, the people couldn't take it anymore, and they all gave up on their lives.
My goodness me, telling us what happened in the Channel last Wednesday night, Thursday morning. Quick look at the weather.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Rain spreading from the west will bring a brief, mild spell, but it'll be cold again by Thursday. It's rather breezy and damp at the moment with fog over western hills, but it's mild everywhere.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Yeah, it's 10 degrees warmer this morning when I woke up. Now, let's take a look at some of the best pictures in the newspapers for you this morning. Here we go. The Times captures the winners of the International Wedding Photographer of the Year competition. Look at those. They're great, aren't they? Featuring sweet and somewhat questionable snapshots. I love the one with the lamp. How clever is that? I think that was the actual overall winner. The Telegraph tells us the sun may be responsible for creating half of the Earth's water, and it's featuring a woman in a bikini taking what looks like a freezing dip in the Lake District yesterday morning. And the Mail brings us a glimpse at a record-breaking 11-stone, 5-pound halibut captured in Norway. No, it surfs pop in the Brazilian city of Natal this weekend when the Surf Dog Festival took place. Have a look at these pictures. Here we go. During the competition, dogs surf next to their owners on paddle boards, and beginner pooches wore life vests to ensure safety in the water. First place winners were Parafina and her owner Augusto Caesar. The pair had previously won silver and bronze medals at the World Championships. Who knew there was also a World Championships for dog surfing? There we go. Champions. Very pleased with themselves. He looks as though he's having a great time, doesn't he? Did that make you smile? We hope so. Coming up, British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell is accused of preying on young girls at her trial in New York. We'll have the latest on that.
From the time I was a little girl, I felt this spark. This positive force that always pushed me forward. I was like a diamond in the rough. I knew the woman I wanted to become. Strong, optimistic, resilient. A brighter future is in all of our hands, and I believe the best is yet to come. Introducing the Pandora Brilliance Collection, lab-created diamonds.
Imagine if you could pick up the same soothing emollient formula of Double Base prescribed by your GP for problem dry skin conditions like eczema without having to visit your doctor. It's easy to get the great Double Base treatment you trust. And there's also flare relief from Double Base, a unique...
Hello again, everyone. I'm sure you're aware that new rules have come into force this morning requiring masks on public transport and also in shops. And the booster programme is being rapidly expanded, with the UK aiming for 500,000 jabs a day. And there's new isolation rules for those who've been in contact with people who've tested positive for the new COVID variant. But could those regulations have an impact on families up and down the country for Christmas? Have a listen to what the Health Minister, Gillian Keegan, told me earlier on.
Obviously, you could be self-isolating over Christmas. You could be. But what we're hoping is that, you know, we keep these cases. Obviously, everybody's going to be contacted. People will start the isolation. With or without this, you could be isolating for Christmas, you know, with another variant.
But your boss, the Health Secretary, said that Christmas was on track and it was all going to be fabulous.
Well, of course, Christmas is on track. And actually, what everybody wants for Christmas is, if you haven't had your first jab, come and get it. If you haven't had your second jab, come and get it. And if you haven't had your booster, come and get it when you're asked. Yeah. That's all we want for Christmas.
So I also asked the Minister if the government is going to struggle to staff the extended vaccine rollout with the aim to add an additional 1 million jabs to the current 2.5 million that we're also doing at this time of year.
We've used in the past, you know, NHS staff, obviously the community nursing staff, the pharmacies, the GPs, volunteers, retired doctors and nurses. We've used that pool of staff in the past, so I guess they're going to be looking at which of those they need to, you know, bring back into. So
you're going to mobilise an army of NHS people.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a lot of people. I mean, I don't know, you know, lots of. In my case, we had lots of retired doctors and nurses. We had lots of community volunteers as well who had first aid training. So we did have a lot of that in the first instance.
And they'll get the call up again.
Well, they'll look at what they need to do, but you know, we do have, you know, the facilities, and we do have the people, and we do have the vaccine. So they'll just be putting the plan together to see what's going to make most sense.
Tamara's here. So is Christmas on or off?
Well, I think the message the government are trying to get across is that we don't know how big a threat the Omicron variant is or how effective the vaccines are going to be. So these measures, which are in place for the next 3 weeks, taking us to around the 20th of December, aim to slow it down while we get the booster rollout ramped up. So they want to get 3.5 million people a week boosted. All adults over 18 who had their second jab 3 months ago will be eligible. And they're hoping that as a result of all that action, things will be able to be relatively normal at Christmas time. But of course, there are no guarantees because we simply don't know if it will turn out to be very, very transmissible, more so than the Delta variant. And we might be in a situation of needing more restrictions. So at the moment, you've got a case where these restrictions on mask wearing, for example, in England, expire before Christmas. They don't want to say whether they'll need to be extended or whether people should be able to go to their office party or schools should be having nativity plays. These were the sort of issues being raised by Tory MPs in Parliament yesterday. I think the government feels that it is up to employers and up to schools to make these decisions. They don't want to mandate anything at the moment or raise fears that people are all going to be trapped in their homes alone at Christmas at this stage, because we simply don't know.
OK, tomorrow's take, 9
See you at
o'clock.
9.
Looking forward to it. Thank you. Meantime, let's get more on the new rules. Aisha is at Victoria train station in central London for us. Are they all wearing their masks, Aisha? Good morning.
Morning, Kay. Yeah, vast majority here are wearing their masks. There are still a few people who aren't, but here at Victoria, they've got an announcement playing every 10 to 15 minutes telling people they must wear their face coverings in the station and on trains, as once again, face coverings on public transport in England has become mandatory, bringing England in line with the rest of the UK on that front, and anyone not wearing a mask risking getting fined for it. We've spoken to a couple of commuters this morning about how they feel, and the overwhelming response is people are happy. Lots of people we've spoken to feel the government made the right call on this in the face of the Omicron variant. But there's also people quite indifferent to all of this as well. They're wearing masks because they have to. If they weren't compulsory, they wouldn't be too bothered either way. So for the next 3 weeks at least, face masks compulsory on public transport.
OK, thank you. Thanks a lot. Opening statements have been made in the long-awaited sex trafficking trial of the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein's ex-girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell. The prosecution accused Ms. Maxwell of preying on vulnerable young girls, while the defence argued that the charges against her were for crimes Epstein committed and she was not Jeffrey Epstein. Joined now by Daphne Barrack, a journalist who has interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell from prison. Hello to you, Daphne. Thanks for joining us. How did you first establish contact with her?
Well, actually, funny enough, we are on Sky News. When I was on my 20th, Rupert Murdoch asked me to do it for Fox. He owned Sky News at the time, so it actually aired as a big scoop with Betty Maxwell. The big scoop was her mother. It was the first anniversary for the death of Robert Maxwell. And we flew Betty to New York, and we had a bonus. Ghislaine, her youngest daughter, joined us for a few days. It was a very big scoop. It was 2 nights in Fox News. It was also on Sky News. It was the front page of the New York Post, and I'm syndicated worldwide. So apparently that's the only TV ever with Delane Maxwell. Who would have known, right?
How's she doing? Do you know how she is faring? She says that she has been assaulted while in prison.
Well, what I want to remind everybody, Kay, is that she, like many other prisoners in America, against the spirit of the American law, are being kept without being charged. So she is right now presumed innocent unless she's being found guilty. If she's found guilty, if she did what she's accused, God forbid, she should be punished harshly. But why are we going through the trial? So far, she has been 17 months really being held in isolation, total isolation, and in very tough conditions. And it raises a big question, not only about her, but about other prisoners who do not have these resources and costly lawyers and are voiceless. So that really what bothered me.
But she's a flight risk, isn't she? She can't be allowed to be out on bail.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, case. So I'm doing the exclusive interviews for CBS Paramount series, which will be on ITV in UK with Fremantle. And one of our big exclusive interviews was with Matt Hallier. He's the head of the security of Ghislaine, who you remember you and I and everybody else were wondering, where is Ghislaine in the globe? And basically his team was hiding her for months, not from the authorities, he said from us, the media, and they also thought that maybe Jeffrey Epstein was murdered, and they thought maybe there was a killer out there. So basically, he claimed that she was never a flight risk, that the moment Jeffrey Epstein died and Kevin Maxwell, her brother, asked him to go into action, he said, I'm flying you out of the country. She refused. He tried again and again. She refused. And if you notice, Kay, nobody revealed his name, but when they put the $28 million bail, which was refused, 1 million of it was actually Matt Hallier, who was willing to put $1 million or pound because he was so sure that she will not escape. So, I mean, the judge didn't agree with him, but he is very convinced she is not a flight risk.
Wasn't she hiding somewhere and the FBI had to storm the house?
So she was hiding. They were actually moving her every 2 weeks from one place to another, but mostly, between family and friends. But they claimed that she was not hiding from the FBI, but from the media. She had a new husband, as you know, even her brothers didn't know, but she had a new husband, stepchildren, and she thought she didn't want them to face the media intrusion. So basically, that's her claim. That's what her siblings are saying, and that's what the head of the security is saying. And he believes her, and he knows probably better than you and I.
Yeah, and I'm sure my viewers will make up their own minds. Just remind me of the charges that she's facing.
She's actually facing 8 charges. 6 of them has to do with sex abuse, sex trafficking, of course, with underage girls. That's a problem because the underage is different in different countries. The other 2 is actually the 7th and 8th charges are actually have to do with perjury, that she allegedly lied under oath and that has to do with the civil lawsuits, which you remember Virginia Roberts sued her and they settled, and the settlement is discreet. So let's see.
Yeah, well, again, a different judge has a different view on that, but we'll have to wait and see. As you said, just before I let you go, how long do you expect the trial to last?
Well, they say 6 weeks. Her siblings, by the way, are going to shuttle back and forth. There was always somebody there. So it's long, 6 weeks, but let's see. There may be surprises with the witnesses on the prosecution side. They are still, I know it was reported that she is going to take the stand. This is not decided yet. So 6 weeks is minimum, including Christmas and New Year's Eve in the middle. Not good news for the jury, but it may be 7 or 8.
Okay, it's good to talk to you. Thanks for your insight, Daphne. Much appreciated. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Joshua, our legal commentator, is with us now. Joshua Rosenberg, of course. Morning, Joshua. What's your take on what's likely to happen over the next few weeks?
I think prosecutors and the defence are relieved that the trial started on time with all the complications of COVID and everything else, and the prosecution were able to outline their case, which is that Ghislaine Maxwell procured girls for the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. And the defence were able to outline their case, which is that he's the person who should be in the dock, and because he killed himself while he was in prison, the prosecution is simply going after her instead. But we're now down to the evidence. As you know, we've got the first witness who's begun giving his evidence. He's the personal pilot who used to ferry Jeffrey Epstein around. And no doubt the prosecution will try to give us some idea of the lifestyle that Epstein led and their allegations about the involvement of Ghislaine Maxwell.
OK, it's something like 6 weeks is what we were hearing. And I also just raised the issue there about flight risk. That is why she is in prison, is it, at the moment?
She was denied bail because it's thought that she has the ability and the money to leave the United States, and if she were to do so, well, then she wouldn't come back. And clearly she's not been granted bail pending the trial, and I don't think she'll be granted bail during the trial. So she'll be kept in custody. But she at least is able, as you've seen, to attend court wearing her normal clothes and to create an impression for the jury, which has to decide, crucially, whether these witnesses who the prosecution have outlined, there are 4 women who were allegedly abused by Epstein with Ghislaine Maxwell's support. These were people who were under the age of 18 at the time. And I think crucial to the trial is the evidence that these witnesses are going to give.
OK, it's good to talk to you, Joshua. As always, thank you. Still to come, the government brings in new measures to curb the spread of the COVID Omicron variant. But just how worried should we be? Talking to a member of SAGE and Immunology after the break. That to come. So what's going to happen to Christmas? We had the health minister on the programme a little bit earlier on, and she conceded that many of us might have to find ourselves in quarantine, self-isolating for Christmas. What will that mean for Christmas plans? Let's speak to Professor Paul Moss from the Institute of Immunology and Immunotherapy at the University of Birmingham, previously attended stage as well, of course. Hello to you, Professor. How worried are you that Christmas might be off again?
I don't think we need to worry too much about that at this stage. It's what a difference a week makes since we last spoke. But I think as Biden, actually, President Biden said, I think we should be concerned but not panicking at the current time. And the measures that we got in place have a good chance of gaining some control here, I think.
Is it right that if you have the Omicron variant, you should, if you come into contact with somebody who's had that you should self-isolate? Is that your view?
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. I think the two ways that we're adopting to try and control this are, one, in behavioural change, obviously, reducing transmission, so the travel restrictions, more lateral flows, so forth, masking, of course, as we talked last week. And the second big factor, of course, is the immunity. And we know that we may lose some immunity with this virus. So what's happening is we are boosting our immune levels to super high levels with the plans that were introduced yesterday, and that should retain some protection.
Others say it could be that we're also completely overreacting. How quickly will we know?
Well, I think what we've seen with COVID is that things change very rapidly, don't they? And I think we need at least 3 weeks to assess this. We need excellent epidemiology within the laboratory. People are testing the resistance of the virus against vaccinated samples. So we will need that sort of time. And we'll know a lot more before Christmas.
And as far as being more resistant to vaccine is concerned, that is of significant concern, especially for those that are immunosuppressant or elderly.
Absolutely so. I mean, we've talked before about how it's like a lock and a key. The virus uses a lock to get into the key of our cells. We've been immunized with the key from the Wuhan virus, and now we've got a different key. It can still get into the lock, but it's different. And there are about 30 mutations in that key, and we've seen some of these before, and they do lose antibody binding, but we've never seen them all together. So there is some worry there that some of the antibodies will be lost, but there's the other immunity, the cellular immunity, and that should be largely retained. So I think there's certainly hope that vaccines will still provide protection against severe disease. Yeah.
What do we do as far as the kids are concerned?
Well, you've seen the change that came overnight about the second vaccine for the younger children. We're gradually moving down now, 12 and upwards. So a key factor here will be the severity of the disease of this Omicron. You probably saw that the doctor in South Africa who initially identified it has seen relatively mild cases, which is very encouraging. However, you know, that's a much younger population, as you said yourself. I mean, it's the elderly population we need to worry about. South Africa, only 6% above 65 years, whereas we've got a much higher proportion.
Indeed. So a fourth dose is what we're hearing, though, for some. We've only just heard about the booster. Now we're hearing about a fourth dose, again, for those who are particularly vulnerable. Do you think we're going to find ourselves in a position, at least for the next 2, 3, however many years, that we may have to have a booster every 3 to 6 months?
It's certainly possible, and that with the mRNA vaccines that we're seeing now, there is some antibody waning, and yet the boosting effect is extremely effective. We talked about this last week, over 90% protection against infection with 3 doses. So we may need them regularly. We've also got the AstraZeneca vaccine, which of course is also excellent at cellular immunity as well. So we may need them fairly regularly, but at the moment, we don't quite know how often that will be.
If we find out that Omicron is resistant to the boosters and the vaccines that we've already had, how long does it take to get a new one?
Well, as you know, the companies have already started. The gene has been cloned, but typically talking around 100 days. I mean, we've learned so much in the last 18 months. Nobody felt we'd get a vaccine within a year when the pandemic started, and we did. We got several. So it will be accelerated, and of course, if we were in that severe situation, which I really hope that we won't get to, by the way, we're very well prepared. We know what to do.
Yeah. And Professor, the expansion of these booster doses, though, because for now we have to accept that they're what we've got, so let's work with them. What does that mean for the disparity of boosters and vaccinations around the world, one would have thought that, you know, potentially we wouldn't be seeing the situation in Southern Africa that we're seeing now if we'd sent more doses to them.
Yes, that's been a very lively debate, hasn't it, in the last week and indeed for many months. And I think it's been great to see the countries coming together and the realization that, yes, we're all in this together and we do need much stronger global vaccination to stop these variants from appearing. Yeah, I agree.
Final thought before I let you go. What are your top tips for people trying to keep as safe as possible leading up to Christmas? Obviously, we've seen the new masks coming in to force now. Would you advise people potentially not to go to Christmas parties, to stay as, you know, within their families?
People obviously need to make their own decision, but you're right. We've got good masking policy now for lateral flows are very good tests, Kay. They're very widely available in the UK, and so I would certainly use those before you go to any events with mixing with people. And within reason, obviously, try and enjoy Christmas and see your families.
Okay, let's see what happens. It's good to talk to you as always, Professor Wisewords. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.